Imagine you're attending a conference with 300 other delegates. It's been inspiring, some great conversation. Then suddenly on the stage comes an individual. Little do you know that in a few minutes you're going to be singing as a whole 300 strong choir in 3-part harmony to Jackie Wilson's Higher. Can you picture that? Well, I lived it. And it was amazing. It was electric. And my guest today, James Sills, was the vocal facilitator that made it happen and bring it all together. I'm so pleased that he's joined us, and I trust that as you listen to some of his leadership lessons, you'll see how music can be such an integral part to our lives and the way that we lead others. Enjoy. And a very warm welcome to James Sills, who joins us today. And I'm delighted to welcome him because I was able to experience a 300-person choir that he led. So he's a vocal leader, a musical magician in my mind, and just taught an absolute masterclass in leadership and vocal leadership. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Simon. It's lovely to be with you, and thanks for singing me and entering into that spontaneous choir moment so wholeheartedly. I know it was kind of sprung upon you and everybody else, but it was really beautiful.
It was a lovely. So that any time I hear Jackie Wilson's Higher, I think of that moment now. And that's the power of music, isn't it? It kind of sticks in your core memory, I think. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, songs are the soundtrack to our lives. And I think when you sing a song, you have another level of connection to it. But also when there's a kind of a moment or a peak moment, there's probably songs we can all think of, when we're away on holiday or big moment in life, maybe got married or whatever. And those songs stay with us. And so I kind of starting to find that there's a bit of a byproduct of the work that I do, that certain songs, really help people to reconnect to a particular time, So High and House, yes. High and High by Jackie Wilson will take you back to that lovely conference, with the barefoot community we had last autumn.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Great. Now, typically, I'd like to imagine that we're around a dining room table, and I often ask people what food reminds them of their childhood, but perhaps I want to change it today. What song reminds you of your childhood?
I'm only allowed one. Oh my goodness. I thought Desert Island Disc was hard enough, and you pick 8 for that one. This is a very random one. This is the first one that came into my head, but it was the floral dance, the brass band version. Mm-hmm. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
2 reasons. First of all, the main reason, it makes me think of my grandparents, who Cornish, proud Cornish man, proud Cornish woman, and the floral dance is actually based on a Cornish folk tune. And I remember dancing through the streets with my grandparents, who I used to go down every summer. And I just remember the joy of that, of just doing the dance to that song. But also the fact it's a brass band kind of connects me to where I grew up in Yorkshire. I grew up as a brass player. So, I played the trombone all through my childhood and studied at university. Right. So having not thought about it at all, I would, I'd say that song, just for the joy of it, for the connection to my grandparents, to Cornwall, to my Cornish heritage, to my Yorkshire upbringing. Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that. And thinking about university, what was memorable about you at that time, that age?
I think I've always been an enthusiast. And at university, I kind of didn't have a particularly fixed musical identity. I was playing trombone in the orchestra and big bands and ska bands. I was writing songs on my guitar, playing open mic nights, gigging with my bands, listening to all types of music. And I think, people will just remember me being just really enthusiastic about whatever I was doing. And if I, discovered a new album, just wanting to share it with my friends and just, and just kind of sharing the joy of music, really. I did a joint degree, so it was kind of half inverted commas classical music, half kind of pop music. And so I've always just seen music as this kind of continuum. I've never really liked kind of boxes and labels, and I've always felt quite comfortable kind of skipping between different musical worlds and just being an enthusiast. And I've realized that that's actually, a real kind of strength of what I do. And I think maybe I felt quite apologetic about that, when I was younger, because it felt like it was a little bit kind of muddy, and not, it's good to have something really firm. Like I'm a rock
Sure.
guitarist, or I'm a songwriter, and I was kind of a bit of everything. And I've since kind of specialised a bit, I guess, since then in terms of vocal leadership. But even the world of singing, there was just so many strands and so many elements to it. Yeah, and I'm still an enthusiast. It's still what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Well, and it comes through massively. I think the very human way in which you connect with the groups. I mean, I've had that personally as I've experienced it, but I encourage anyone who hasn't seen James's TEDx talk to go and have a look and see his work. The last, was it 7 or 8 minutes is spent having the group in Manchester sing Free Falling, isn't it?
Free Falling, yeah, Tom Petty.
Yeah. So that's brilliant. Really good work. And we, before we actually pressed record today, we were just talking about this idea of leadership, and maybe you used the term vocal leadership just there. And I really want to call out the work I've seen you do is definitely leading and leading a group. And I want to kind of just validate that. It's just awesome how you take this ragtag group of people that have not got much connection together and bringing them together, singing in harmony is, I think, a really good, metaphor and actual example of turning a group into a team. So thank you for being here.
No, thank you. I mean, it's not me downplaying or down talking the work that I do, but I'm just very, very conscious about language, and particularly within music, because we're used to terms like maestro and choir master, and I've always hated being called either of those things, because that feels very disempowering for the people with whom you're working. Here's this genius on the pedestal, and here we are down here. And if my kind of work and mission is about anything, it's about empowering people, making them feel that music making and particularly singing is for them. And so, the term that I often go to is facilitator, because I genuinely believe that everyone's got their singing voice inside them, and I'm there just to kind of make that process easy, like as in from the French word, facile, make it easier for people, and essentially that is what I feel is at the core of my role. But I realize that, of course, within that, there is a leadership element, because there is someone that needs to be taking charge and all that kind of thing. So I think that's just why I'm always just quite conscious and sometimes nervy around language and how people might introduce me or describe me. But certainly, kind of choir master and maestro and things like that, just make me feel a bit icky, because that's absolutely not what I'm about. So more kind of vocal leader, facilitator. I feel a lot more comfortable with that.
Yeah, the facilitator word is something I have a strong connection with from the work that I do. James, the key set of questions I love to ask every guest: what 3 leadership lessons do you wish you'd learned earlier? What are they for you?
So the first one is it's okay to be you. The second one is get support when you need it. And 3 is that boundaries are vital.
Great. Let's jump in. So the okay to be you then, how did you come to this realization?
I think if I look at the times where I've kind of brought all of myself to my leadership, and I don't mean like absolutely everything. I don't believe in bringing every single bit of you to the table. You've got to leave a little bit behind. But, in terms of leaning into your qualities, the things that make you you, the things that people respond to, the times that I've done that, and as I'm getting older, I feel like I can bring that more and more. And they're the times where I think that people have really responded best, and projects have really flown, and I've got the best results. And, the instances where I felt like I had to do things in a certain way or follow a certain kind of model or precedent, or that I had to lead in a particular way, in a way that maybe wasn't quite true to me, for whatever reason. I think they're the times that I felt like I made less impact and connected less with people. And for me, those 2 things are really vital, making that human connection and having impact. And so,
James, can I ask can I ask something on that?
Sure.
Because one of the things that I think you do brilliantly is have that very human face in this group. So you're on a stage, like my first encounter of seeing you're on a stage. Ego could easily have you kind of inflate yourself to, look at this power I've got over people. what mindset do you approach the event to stay at that, I'll say, kind of equity, that human to human communication? That's certainly how I felt when I was part of the
Yeah.
group. What's your mindset to help you to bring all, the best versions of you to that without necessarily elevating yourself above the group?
Sure. I think it's about like knowing why I'm there. Like, what is my role there? My role, the way I see it, is to help open the door. It's almost like, like in Narnia, where they go through the wardrobe and they discover this amazing world they didn't know existed.
Yes.
I kind of see the world of singing as a bit like that. Like, I just want to take people through the wardrobe with me and introduce people into that world. And it isn't about me. I mean, it isn't about me. It's about the people who are in front of me, And so a question that I always ask myself, whatever context I'm in, is, well, who's it for and what's it for? And I think it was Seth Godin that I first heard using that phrase. And that served me really, really well, because I've, as well as working with corporate groups, I've worked with, CEOs and CFOs, I've also run homeless choirs. I've worked with war veterans. I've run singing for mental health groups. I've run workplace choirs, and those two questions are always the foundation. It's like, yeah, who's it for and what's it for? So it's always about looking who's in front of you and just kind of knowing what their needs are, knowing what, what they are wanting from the session, or, what it is that, the event wants from the experience. Okay, we want more connection.
Yes.
We want people to feel part of something. Great. Okay. None of that is about me and elevating myself. And there's also, a big part of my work is about helping people feel empowered to sing. And because there's so much baggage around singing that people think it's not for them, that it's the reserve of just a few people. And actually, if I come in and start to make it about me, it then, I don't think, creates the best atmosphere for people to give of themselves.
Yeah.
So a huge part of it for me is to make people feel comfortable. Like you say, meet them on a human level. Having a light touch is really, really important. And all of these things, I think have to be in check and in balance, because I don't want to come in and try and, be like the comedian, because then it's about me and it's about me, making everyone laugh. But it's not, for me, it's about having a light touch, which might slightly disarm people, maybe slightly kind of warm people to the experience or to me, build that relationship. And then when the time is right, go through, put the fur coat on, I'll keep going with the metaphor, and go through the wardrobe and take them into Narnia with me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, lovely to explore this, because what I think you do extremely well is kind of I'm going to say the word, assume people are going to join you on that journey through the wardrobe. They're not going to stay in the stately home and hang back. They're going to come with you. The curiosity, you're able to pique that if someone says, I'm not a singer, actually 2 minutes later they're singing. It's interesting. Actually, almost, I'd love to butt this up against, it's okay to be you. And if someone is there, if their you says, I am not a singer, how you're actually kind of challenging someone to see themselves in a different way that's not necessarily them. Yeah.
It kind of seems paradoxical with me saying it's okay to be you. I mean, I don't think there's any greater expression of being oneself than actually singing, because your voice is, it's the most personal thing we have. It's the only instrument that is held within the body. We use that phrase, I was silenced, or, own your voice, reclaim your voice, own your narrative. All these things come back to voice, and that we know that when our voice is heard and received, that it's empowering. And it's not just empowering, but it's important. And we know that actually having our voices silenced, literally, metaphorically, is incredibly damaging. And so actually, it's okay to be you. I feel that me bringing people along with me and opening them up to get them to sing and to feel comfortable is allowing themselves to be themselves. Maybe a part of themselves that they've forgotten, or part of themselves that they pushed down, or whatever. And there's all kind of baggage around this. There's all kind of histories that everybody has with their voice. And, one of the kind of exercises in my book was to get people to reflect on their own singing journey. Think about times in their life where they sung, often maybe when they were younger, What was it that stopped you? What might the roadblocks be? Were you told that you shouldn't sing? You know, what assumptions do you make about singing? Because I really believe that part of you is silenced when your voice is silenced, and that metaphor extends to singing as well. You know, and I think that on the flip side, that's why when people do gain the confidence to sing, it can just be like, it can be really life changing. You know, because it's not just about the singing, but it's about everything that ripples out from that. It's about the confidence, feeling part of something, feeling that you belong, feeling, you know, that you are part of this greater whole. And one of the phrases I often come back to is Ubuntu, which is the South African phrase meaning I am because we are. And I think that when you're singing in a group, that just really sums it up so beautifully, because it is about your individual voice and about you being seen and validated, but within a bigger group and being part of a bigger context. And I think in the age of loneliness, this is just so important and so vital. And I think that's why I keep getting asked to do, you know, things like you experience, because, you know, we're becoming more remote in our work patterns. We're becoming, we know all these things, and what we need are these very visceral human experiences where we can feel deep connection. And actually, the research around singing shows that singing is the thing that does that the quickest. You know, there's a Oxford University study, the icebreaker effect, that pointed to that. So everything that we're talking about here is absolutely backed up by the science as well.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And one of the things, I was looking through my notes of the conference that we were at last year, and I didn't make many notes on your section because obviously we were up singing. But there was a couple of phrases that I did write down. We can all sing at the same time, but we can't all talk at the same time. And I thought that was I've never really thought about that as a thing as well. It kind of that's, you called it synchronous activities. And I really like the challenge of that. Now, could you talk to that a little bit more for a second? Like this idea of the power of singing at the same time and not being able to speak at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for hours. This is what gets me really excited. Look, as humans, we are hardwired for synchronous activities. They make us feel good. I mean, historically in our evolution, they were probably vital to our evolution and our survival of the species. But there's been studies on rowers, for example, on people who row together and how that fosters a sense of connection, or like when we dance with other people, or when we sit down and we eat with other people, or we're in a huge crowd at a football game and everyone's singing and chanting at the same time. Like, we know that synchronous activities where we are in sync, literally with other people, are good for us. We know that because we know that intuitively, we feel it. But also there's lots of science that supports it as well. And with singing, we get that. Singing is a synchronous activity, but there are so many layers to that as well. We're synchronizing words, we're synchronizing
Yes.
rhythms. We may be synchronizing emotions, the way that we kind of, emoting together. And also on a physical, on a cellular level, our heartbeats start to synchronize as well when we're singing, because we're all kind of breathing in and breathing out together. We're phrasing together. And so, when we're in a room of people together, that's pretty powerful, knowing that actually our heart rates are starting to synchronize. But it's also something that blows my mind. I mean, for the last 5 years, I've been running an online singing community. We meet twice a week. We've been doing that, for the last 5 years. And even though people are joining from every corner of the world, we're singing together live, on Zoom, and knowing that those people are not just synchronizing their voices, but also that our heartbeats are synchronizing and our physiology is starting to go in tandem, just because we're singing the same song, is completely mind blowing. But I think that starts to explain, why singing does feel good, and we get our dose that we need. We get our the dopamine hit, we get our oxytocin, we get the serotonin, we get the endorphins. Again, that's all science backed. So it doesn't come as any surprise to me, when we've been singing with a group for 15 minutes and suddenly people feel really good and connected, and they'll come up to me and they'll be kind of starry-eyed and say, wow, that's amazing. And I always respond and just say, well, I'm really glad, that's brilliant. But it doesn't surprise me. I don't say that, but it doesn't surprise me, just because, it's hardwired into us.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. And now your second point was about getting support. Always get the support when you need it. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think sometimes when you're early on when you're a leader, you kind of think that you have to know everything, and that you have to work out every problem yourself, and that you have to have every solution yourself.
Yeah.
And I suppose, this also goes back to, when you are a leader, an entrepreneur, or whatever, you are quite used to being self-sufficient. And I think it can be very tempting to not get support, whatever area there might be, in terms of professional life, in terms of personal life. And I know that when I've felt at sea, sometimes either professionally or personally, um, and I've got the support and I've reached out and spoken to people, that there's always been a way through. And sometimes just the very nature of reaching out and speaking to someone, you start to articulate the problem, what you might perceive to be the problem yourself. And just by doing that, you can kind of help work your way through what the problem might be, a bit like you might do with a coach.
Yes.
Or for someone else to say, do you know what, I've been there, like, it's really tough, but it's going to get better. But also I think, if I just think of a project I'm involved with at the minute, which we might go on to talk more about, which is a project with the BBC, taking 50 football fans from the stadium to the stage, teaching them to sing opera and performing throughout the year. I'm the choral lead for that, so I'm the person running the weekly rehearsals. But there's a huge amount of people involved in this project, so we have a production team, we have social media teams, we've got kind of superstar ambassadors coming in, like Leslie Garrett, the opera singer, like Chris Kamara, the footballer. We've got composers that I'm working with. It's just an endless list. But actually, for me, that's so nice, because I'm like, oh, well, they've got that bit. I just need to come in and do the thing that I'm really good at. I don't need to worry about booking the gigs. I don't need to worry about doing the orchestral arrangements, because I could do that, but I'm not. That's not my thing. Let's get someone else to do that. And that is really, really liberating, because then that just liberates me to lead doing the thing that I feel that I'm best at, and I'm most in my zone. I'm most in flow, and I can make the most impact. And I think that's a really nice place to be in. And also, on a kind of a smaller scale, I mentioned sofa singers. I've now got a small team with me who work on that, who take care of, the admin or the behind the scenes support, which then allows me just to do the stuff that I really love, which is the delivering, the planning, the strategic stuff. And then, like I'm off on holiday for 2 weeks next week. The team are just going to run the sessions whilst I'm away. So there's, that's very kind of practical support as well, so I don't feel, there's a time with sofa singers where I felt, gosh, everything is on me. I'm scheduling the emails, I'm running the sessions, I'm doing all the social media posts, and that was only like a third of my overall business, so it was just crazy. So I think, getting support in all forms isn't just, it's just vital.
Yeah. Yeah, really, really good. And there's sometimes there is this kind of breakdown moment. I don't mean like complete breakdown, but like disassembling that has to happen for you to realize that the need is there, and maybe catching that a little bit earlier is something I'm having to work on. It's like what support is needed.
For
Sometimes
sure.
we don't spot it soon enough. That support is needed. And,
exactly.
and just the power
exactly,
of that.
Yeah. And so often with these things, you learn from experience as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the Bradford Football Club. Perhaps we could dip into that just a little bit more there. How did that come about, like in terms of your involvement? How did you, and why Bradford as well? What was it about Bradford that...
So I grew up in Bradford. So Bradford's my hometown.
Okay. Right.
And I've been a kind of a lifelong football fan, with slightly complicated allegiances, but one of those allegiances is to Bradford City. And as a teenager, growing up, it was all music and football, and the two at times were interlinked. But a big part of my teenage years was getting the bus on Saturday afternoon with my friends, going to the record shop and then going to the football game. It was, wonderful. But anyway, that was a long time ago. But I was basically contacted at the end of last year, 2024, by a production team saying, look, your name's been put forward by somebody. This is a project we're doing. It's a 12-month project in Bradford, taking 50 football fans from the stage from the stadium to the stage. But it's really about opening access to the arts and supporting mental health and empowering and building community through singing. Do you think you'd be interested? I was like, have you written the job description? Maybe apart from the opera bit, like opera is not my specialism. But as we've just said, there are other people who are dealing with outside of things. And you know, this kind of goes back to, you know, it's okay to be you, because, you know, it's bringing in so many strands that I feel make me who I am. You know, my kind of Bradford heritage and my background. I you know, I understand the city, and I know what it is to be a football fan, and why football, you know, it can be such a positive influence in lots of ways. And, you know, I just love following football and the communities it builds, you know. And then obviously the singing side of things, and the fact it was community based, and there was a mental health focus, and it was working with people from all different backgrounds, you know. But also the fact that this was something for kind of radio and TV. And, you know, I've started, you know, as I've become more of an advocate for singing, and with my book, you know, I have been on radio more. I was on TV quite a bit with sofa singers. I feel comfortable in that space, and that's a way for me to promote my message around singing and connection. So, you know, and they said, look, that's going to be a big part of it. You're going to be very public face of this campaign. And so it was a complete no-brainer for me to say yes to it. And then I thought, what have I got myself in for? You know, because before we'd even had our first rehearsal, Simon, our first 4 gigs had been announced, and it was like Jeremy Vine Show on Radio 2, London Barbican with the BBC Singers, light on the pitch at Valley Parade. And I was like, I haven't got the singers yet. You know, we're not auditioning the singers. We don't even know if people are going to apply. You know, and so I had to say yes to all of those things before we'd even sung a note. And we had 5 rehearsals, just, you know, before our first gig. So, there's not been anything like it. But at the same time, it's kind of built on almost everything that I've done over the last 20, 30 years as a musician, as a leader, as a football fan, all those things. So I just really feel like I'm able to draw on all those elements and bring those to the project.
Yeah, I mean, that okay to be you piece, again, feels like it's all kind of coming together nicely there in that example. Really good. I wish you the best of success in those performances coming up as well. It feels like that's a nice jump into the third point, actually. Boundaries are vital. What did you, I'm making some assumptions here, but what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, boundaries are vital. I think especially when you feel really closely aligned with your work, and sometimes the line between work and pleasure are blurred. And for a lot of the time, I really like that. So, for example, there's a group that I perform with, an a cappella group, and I've toured around the world with them. The people in that group I'll consider some of my best friends. It's more like a brothership, really. And so the lines there are just completely blurred between, you know, performing, friendship, personal life, private life. And I think with that particular project, I'm really happy with that, because it kind of just feels like I'm all in. But I suppose where I'm talking about boundaries more generally is kind of energetically, I think. I think that's probably a really big one, in that, you know, I realise that I kind of bring a lot of energy to my work, and that it's really important for me to have boundaries when I'm not actually working. Because the temptation is, I think, I heard, who was it? Jimmy Carr say this on a podcast the other day. So, like, sometimes, like, work is more fun than fun, or something like that. You know, and so there's a sense that when you're doing something that you're really, like, in your element, and the adrenaline's high, and you just want to be doing it, you could be out doing it all the time, all day, all evening, every weekend. And that, you know, that just doesn't serve me well. And actually, during COVID was a chance to reflect on that. And there was a particular bit in Oliver Burkeman's wonderful book, 4,000 Weeks, where he was talking about not all time being equal, you know, and that actually, you know, kind of being free or having time where you're not working on a weekend is a lot more valuable than if it's during the week, because, you know, there are a lot of other things you can do. Other people are free at that time, you know, and all those kind of things. And actually, since things have unlocked, I've worked really hard to put the majority of my work kind of Monday to Friday in the daytimes. And partly that's because I've got young kids and it makes sense for me to be working with them in school. So I've got as much time with them as possible. But also because when Saturday comes, pre-COVID, I'd probably be off doing workshops every other Saturday, me giving my energy so that people could enjoy that in their free time. And then it was Sunday and then I get going again. Whereas now on a Saturday, I'll go to football, have time with my family, I'll do nothing. And for me, that is really, really important. But I think it can be really hard sometimes when the work that you do is really pleasurable and really fun. And and let's face it, as a freelancer, it's paying you as well. Part of that process for me around boundaries was doing the coaching course with Barefoot, actually, which is how we know each other.
Yes.
And actually doing a lot of work around boundaries, and it not having been something that I'd thought a huge amount before, because when you are a musician, it's that kind of is your identity, and where does work begin and where does all that stuff. And I think for me, obviously having a family kind of helps with that, because I have to be times where I'm totally present at home and I haven't got my kind of James Sills musician hat on. But also, I don't think even if I didn't have my family or whatever, I think just carving out those boundaries is just so important. And that old adage, you can't pour from an empty cup, and all those things are true. So I'm now spending 3 or 4 days a week in the gym. I start every morning now with a walk, so I don't schedule any calls until 10 o'clock at the earliest.
Yeah.
So they're all kind of quite firm boundaries as well, which just help me in every aspect. Help me deliver the best work, help me look after myself, help me look after my body and my brain, and hopefully look after the people who depend on me a bit more as well.
Yeah. James, thank you for being so open about that. What part does music play in your family?
It's just there. Like, we live in the hills in North Wales, and so just being out in nature is just there. It's a bit like, I was touring in Finland last year, and I love the Finnish relationship with the natural world. It's very no nonsense, uncomplicated. And I kind of feel that that's my kids' relationship with music. I'm not forcing it on them, but they're just kind of around it. They know that I'm a musician. They know I run choirs. There's always songs for every occasion. We live in Wales, so land of song and all that. And I think that's just kind of how I want everyone to see singing, really, is that it is something kind of sacred, but it is also just part of the everyday as well. It's part of our everyday expression. I mean, my eldest is 7, and without any, kind of tutoring or cajoling from me, she's actually really interested in singing. And my wife and I went to their school, Eisteddfod, which is their kind of, it's like a kind of singing festival, the other week. And we didn't know she'd done this, but she'd put herself forward to be the soloist in her class, learnt this song in Welsh. Neither myself or my wife speak Welsh. And she actually got up, funnily enough, in a football kit. So the apple's not falling far from the tree, and sang this wonderful song in Welsh, and brought the house down, and she was amazing. But that was without, honestly, a stress to say, without any support, from home, other than the way we support them in all their endeavours, So they've got a very uncomplicated but direct relationship with singing and music, and long may that continue.
Great. I've sung with various members of my family throughout my life, brothers and that. And my son is 18. My youngest is 18, and we have this thing when we go on walks. We call into a local church, that might be en route, an old church, and we sing "Nearer My God to Thee" as a duet.
Wow.
And I'll sing either tenor or bass, and he'll sing the melody, and it's just this thing. And there was a period for about 18 months where he didn't want to do it. About 6 months ago, it's like, it's a bit embarrassing. It's like, didn't want to do it anymore. But we were walking just a few weeks back and called into this old church in the country and sang again, and it was wonderful. It was just lovely. Then there's again that synchronicity and connection that comes through that. He's got a lovely voice, and I enjoy the opportunity to sing with him is
beautiful.
one of life's pleasures. Really enjoy it.
It's
just this little ritual we've got on our hikes. If we come across a church and it's open, we'll go in and we'll sing a verse or two. So it's really
that's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I mean about bringing the singing into every day. You might not be doing that every day, but that's just kind of something that you two do. It's not just like
Yeah.
a special occasion you have to prepare for or rehearse for. It's just like, oh, let's just go and
Yeah.
do this in a kind of very
Yeah.
matter-of-fact way. And I think that's just a wonderful thing. And yeah, and there's something that's very beautiful and very deep about singing with people that you love.
James, this has been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so pleased to have found out a little bit more about you and your mindset and just the way that you go about your work. And thank you for sharing those lessons as well. I know that will be very helpful. It has been helpful for me, and I'm sure it will be for others too. I'd love to just ask you, just going back to that younger version of yourself, any advice that you would offer them at university?
Just keep being enthusiastic and keep following your curiosity. It's okay to be you. And yeah, just take your own path. Take your time. Take your own path. Things are going to work out.
Great. Thank you. Well, what the listener won't know, we had some technical problems earlier and we had to re-record a portion of this conversation. And I'm delighted that we did, actually. And if you think about technical glitches that go for a better outcome, I think the second version, from my perspective as well, is an enhanced conversation. So I really appreciate
the life lesson
technology
in that
served that
itself,
up
isn't
for
it?
us.
Yeah, great. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I shall thank my dodgy internet connection here in the Welsh Hills for that.
Thank you, James. And I wish you the really best of success in all your endeavours, particularly the Bradford Football Club. I know that will be on your mind and pulling that group of people together.
If people want to follow that particular project, there's a podcast series that is documenting the whole story of the choir with new episodes every 2 weeks. It's called Bantam of the Opera, which is a play, obviously, on Phantom of the Opera, and it's on BBC Sounds. So if you go to BBC Sounds and Google Bantam of the Opera, you'll be able to hear about the whole mad journey that we're all on.
Thank you. I look forward to listening. I will seek that out myself, and thank you. How else will they get in contact with you if or follow you on social media?
So yeah, I'm on Instagram at Sills Music and LinkedIn, which is I guess where a lot of your listeners might be. Just look for me, James Sills, and you'll find me. I think it might come up as James Sills Choir Starter, which is another way sometimes people introduce me, which is fine. But yeah, find me there. It'd be great to connect.
I'm going to go for vocal empowerist and vocal facilitator maybe from now on. Thank you, James.
Great, excellent.
Much
my bio keeps changing all the
insight.
time when I, changing my mind.
Great.
Beautiful. Thanks, Simon. It's been
you.
really lovely chatting to you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us at the After Dinner Leadership Table, and trust that you've got good value from listening to this episode. Thanks for being here. One question for you. The question is, so what? What will you do with what you've just heard? And here's a few suggestions. Number 1, lead with more purpose. 2, mentor with patience. 3, share with pride. You think of anyone who you know that would benefit from listening to what you've just heard, that would help them to be a better leader today or in the future. Please share, like, subscribe. It helps other people to consume the content. And we wish you all the very best of success. And please listen again to another After Dinner Leadership conversation.